Thank you for this joining this conversation, Anna. I really appreciate your time here. So Anna is the senior manager of sales enablement at Zoom, and her mission is to develop world-class program and people. Yeah, welcome again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I want to start the conversation with two questions. First is about you, and the second is about the profession. Right? So the way I view sales enablement, it's not just like sales training or it's a department which sits under sales operations or marketing operations with the sole purpose is to prepare the sellers to sell, right? So the way I view sales enablement is it's a strategic and a transformative business function that actually enables chief revenue officers and chief business officers to drive go to market, to be more customer centric, to sell more effectively. So you have a history of years of experience in driving sales enablement in very large organizations such as Oracle, DataStax, and now Zoom. So tell me a little bit about you and tell me what brought you to sales enablement.
Yeah, great question. Actually started off in the customer success world. So absolutely from the end user perspective of what was successful, what did that look like? What did the customer want to see? I gradually made my way into operations and held just a lot of kind of different roles within the larger organization I was at the time. Did a little bit of a stint in the partner organization as well. And then I ended up being poached by another team to be in what we called sales readiness at the time. So that's probably similar to what sales effectiveness, sales enablement is. And then once I got there about 13 years ago, 14 years ago, I was pretty much where I knew I wanted to be. And I feel like I had that really well rounded approach from being on the inside, going through kind of the order entry front end side, and then kind of just tying everything together. So I like to say that I've had kind of the big company training, and then I'm able to kind of take the larger process view and then kind of insert it into what the business needs at the moment. And so I've always felt a really big sense of satisfaction helping folks get ramped up, helping folks actually get to the root of the problem, and then ultimately celebrating their successes with them. And so, as a support function in sales enablement, just knew I just loved everything about it. I loved being with sales folks. I loved helping them make a difference and seeing their successes. It just, brought me such a sense of satisfaction. So I knew that's where I wanted to be. And I'm very grateful to be able to still be practicing in the space today. And of course, as you know, it's huge today. So it's very exciting to see the evolution of the role as well.
Yeah, fantastic,
Mhm.
fantastic. So the second question I have is about this profession, right? As you said, particularly the transformative nature of it. So the way I view, for example, Zoom has been really transformative in our lives. And I first started using Zoom when I was in a startup. I was a cybersecurity startup. I was heading an enterprise product, and I just loved it. I hooked on it. And if you look at last 9 months, people have been using Zoom. All these new use cases showed up, like school teachers, grandmoms, community meetings. And the other day, I just walked in my kitchen to find out the fifth graders are doing you know, a cooking and baking party over Zoom. This is an unbelievable.
Yeah.
So speaking of this transformative nature of technology, tell us a time in your career, like when you experience sales enablement as like truly transformating, meaning you kind of drove a change. So examples would be, say, selling software licenses to subscription, or product only to product and solution, or selling, moving up market from selling from SMB to mid market to enterprise, or even like changing the buyer, selling it to an IT manager to selling it to the CIO. So all these are like huge changes, right? And that needs a new sales playbook, new messaging, new strategy. And I view that sales enablement drives a majority of it, right? That initiative.
Yeah. So to your point earlier, It truly is a strategic function. And so depending on what, and a lot of the things that you've mentioned are a lot of what I call um, enablement, I guess initiatives that roll out with in alignment to what the company is trying to accomplish. So whether it be, we need to focus on getting higher level benefactors in our conversations, whether it be a complete change of messaging altogether, whether it be consolidating the business to be more enterprise focused. All of those big initiatives really starts with um, having enablement in the know a little, like when those conversations are happening. We like to call it having a seat at the table, because really understanding what the goal is really helps us in enablement figure out how we craft that program. So to your point, is this what do we actually need our field folks to be doing? Is it talking about a new story? If that's the case, then we can back into, well, what type of program do we need to create? Is it messaging? What type of collateral needs to be done? What type of training needs to be done? What's the format of that training? How long should it be? So having really a say or understanding at that level of what that strategy is really helps us go through that transformation and appropriately create the program to support that. So it's kind of a backwards approach, but hopefully enablement leaders have a say. And it's usually what happens is it's been decided, and then you're told, hey, we need the field to do X, Y, and Z, and you can just throw it together and make it happen. Now, if we don't have those questions identified and we're not having a good pulse of what we can and can't do with the resources that we have, it becomes more difficult for that transformation to take effect. So, for example, we did a lot on focusing on the enterprise at older companies, and so what we
Mhm.
decided was, well, what does that entail? What are all the cross-functional groups that are involved? What type of collateral do we need to start messaging this out? And then what's the plan on making sure the field understands their involvement every step of the way to start operating with this new process or with this new team? So those are the ways that I've seen it be successful depending on what the initiative is. So hopefully that kind of answers your question.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, it does. Um, yeah, and I think, like, if I look at organization success, right? There's a lot more focus about being customer focused, customer centric, right? And I think very recent event happened. The Zappos CEO, he passed away, right? This is started with delivering customer happiness, and then
Right.
Zoom is all about customer happiness, right? Eric's laser focus on customer happiness. So so sales enablement works as an orchestrator, right, to align all these go-to-market teams with customer needs. And definitely, as you said, right, you cannot do it alone. You have to work with sales, product marketing, product management, all the leadership teams to design and deliver context for sellers, and
Mhm.
then to communicate very clearly so that you don't overwhelm them, because that
Right.
has the simplicity is of the messaging is the key, actually. Sometimes the subject matter expert, they talk too much, and you kind of have to dial it down and make it more digestible for people and
Yeah.
memorable. So you kind of need a very strong internal network, and you need a executive sponsorship, and then of course you need a fantastic communication skills to have these influence many times without authority, right? So
Mhm.
so so tell me your strategy and Zoom, right, to get this executive buy-in. The program you're running at Zoom, which is Sales Manager Excellence. I'm really interested to hear about that.
Yeah. So I think that's probably going to be the number one question people always have for me. Like I've been asked multiple times. It is hard to get that executive buy-in sometimes. And so really my strategy is it's all about visibility as much as I can. And I like to share a lot of the times. People have preconceived notions of what sales enablement is and what they provide and what their roles and responsibilities are. And so a lot of the times, if you even have that conversation up front, you might uncover, hey, we're totally on different pages here. Or if that's actually more of the expectation, then I can properly kind of figure out what it is that you're looking for. So visibility goes a long way. Now, the difficult, challenging thing is with us, as you know, everybody's been forced into this remote work world. It's really difficult to be able to get a lot of FaceTime with sometimes the right people. So, being very strategic about the asks, making everything in your life more efficient as possible. Um, uh, you would think communication, like we always say, over communicate, but when you're
Mhm.
remote, you almost have to do that more, which also adds to the noise sometimes. So I don't know that there's a magic bullet solution yet, but in my eyes, it's like, let's again come back to the basics and be like, this is what my plan is. Like, I want to share with you every step of the way. Like, so, these five things happen that may have shifted the plans. And as long as you're properly communicating these changes and you're making it very visible what the action plan is, what the roadmap looks like, um, the things that are happening that might have derailed you, made you change directions. To me, that keeps their buy-in solid. It makes they understand what's happening every step of the way. And you're asking them for input along the way too, because as sales enablement professionals, we're not always the ones telling you what to do. We're leveraging the subject matter experts to kind of make this happen for the sellers. And so to me, it's all about visibility. It's also about getting the feedback at that same time so that you're still marching in the right direction. So, of course, identifying the right people that are sponsors for the program to begin with, and then making sure that every step of the way they have an update. I don't know what the cadence is, but they know what's happening. They know the changes that have come in. They know kind of deliverable deadlines, and they know what are possible detractors and roadblocks to kind of look out for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So over communicate, identify the not only it's the subject matter experts, the sponsors will back you up, and then again
yeah.
over communicate, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, not to the point where you're being just extra noise. Finding creative ways to do it has
Mm-hmm.
been interesting. Even on my side, I've always worked remote, but in this type of environment, it's a little bit different. You have to find ways. You'll find oftentimes some people like to communicate in different ways. Some
Yes.
people are very, just like how people learn. People have different ways of learning. People have different ways of communicating. If chat is the way to go, some people are very active, but some people are not, but they'll look at it, they'll read everything, but they won't comment. So finding creative ways to get to the right stakeholders and actually just asking them, how do you like to be communicated with? Do you actually prefer an email? Do you want me to chat you, or is that going to clog up your inbox? Being very open about that has been successful for me. I like to say, I'm going to try something new here. I'm going to chat you personally. Does this work for you? So being creative there, finding a way, but ultimately being, and I learned this from one of our sales leaders and I love it. He says you can be persistently pesky. So it's not like you're super annoying, but you've got to be persistent about it. We're all fighting for each other's time right now. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And the time, I think this pandemic made the time a lot more precious, right? So
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
people also, they have started to look into different things like it's a time for reflection, being reflective as well, and
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think
Yeah.
so I want to shift gears a bit more, and moving from the macro level at the company level conversation to like a daily routine of this function, right? A day-to-day activity. So my observation is I have seen many sales enablement functions are still very much like activity driven or like output driven, not like outcome driven. So
Right.
the examples of these activity driven metrics are, say, completion of a course, like a certification, even like video watching time, right? And the matrix for outcome driven enablement is measuring ramp time, deal size, ACV. Those are the metrics, and those are the revenue metrics your chief revenue officer care about, right? You will not go and report to your chief revenue officer or head of sales office, hey, all my GTM team has completed 100 hours of video what training video, right? That's not, doesn't make sense. So where do you see the sales enablement programs in this journey of the shifting from activity based to more of outcome based? Like, are the analytics available? Are they easy to look at? Is it a different department looking at it? You don't have a visibility into it. So actually, can you demonstrate the impact of an enablement quantifiably, right? Not like a very
Qualitatively.
what
Yeah.
qualitatively. So
Mhm.
I mean, for example, like say if you pick a metric, for example, you said like you are working with some sales exec, right? And you decide with them like, hey, this is the metric we want to focus this quarter, right? And then say first call to demo to proposal to procurement, whatever it is, and then you baseline that, and you see before and after this enablement program, what happens. So tell me a
Mhm.
bit about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. In all of my years, I will honestly tell you I have not seen it done perfectly. I wish there was an out of a box solution for the metrics. I feel as though it really is dependent on the business needs, right? So I'm a big believer that, and I've played around with creating a lot of my own type of reports and metrics to start tracking. So I would have my own kind of baseline benchmark to look at. But ultimately, you nailed it. At the end of the day, the hard and fast numbers like time to first deal, third deal, whatever it may be, those are the ones that are impacted. Now, I like to layer on second set of metrics, like a second tier of metrics that are more qualitative to see if there are trends. So you're right. Did they complete the training? Did they even do it? Did they pass the certification? Those things also do help us, but they're not exactly tied to it. There are correlations there. Utilization of certain tools. Basically, that data should be telling us also feeding into a certain percentage of what that overall hard and fast quantitative number is. And so what I've done is, and I'm in an interesting spot right now where I'm kind of getting to craft my own types of metrics for frontline managers. They're going to look a little bit different, right? They're going to look at percentage of team attainment and those hard and fast numbers. So we're also going to look at percentage of, the promotion, the growth, the attrition, people that have been like promoted and are giving back or actually sharing more best practices. So like as I kind of look at those, they're still baselined on what we call success performance metrics. And ultimately, that's how I view it. It's really easy to pull those other metrics, but they're more of a barometer for the tools really, and whether our content is effective, whether or not people are actually looking at it or people are actually using it. So well, that feeds into it sometimes. Being really close with uh, analytics teams or insights team, people that can pull that data for you is the best. We're fortunate that we have folks like that. Other times, you build it yourself, right? You
Yeah.
you kind of do your own digging, and you have to start from somewhere, though, Jaya, is what I'm saying. So wherever you are in the organization, whether you have a team or not, you want to start actually looking at the numbers that your CRO does care about, and that should be your starting point. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it takes longer time to get to that, right? So
Yeah.
someone was struggling with a Tableau and a dashboard, and it's like I'm every time I work with the enterprise BI person, it takes a lot of my effort, right? So I'm actually taking that time away from actually what I'm passionate about, which is training people, right? The
Right.
tool should be kind of frictionless and get out of their way so that you
Yeah.
can do your job best. And I think we are not there. And but as you said, like you are looking at a new set of metrics, right? Which is for sales managers. It's not so much of a, and the behavioral part of it is a main, it's a very important part of it. As you said, someone who is completing the courses, like, are they asking questions? Are they interested? Are they,
Mm.
not volunteering to be the leader, right? So those, how do you figure those things out? Those are very, very interesting. And then there is a overlap with the, I think, the human resources team as well, right?
Absolutely. Yes, there totally is. And that's where it gets to be pretty fun to kind of put together what we think makes the most sense and then actually see if we can pull some historical data on what we're seeing in terms of trends. Because ultimately, and this is my opinion, and I can experiment a little with this. Even if you're a sales manager that doesn't quite use the tools, you could still be super effective and your numbers can still be amazing. So, how do we then look into that and be like, what are you doing? Like you said, how can we replicate? Are you using a different process? Is that something that we can look at? And so that's some of the diagnosing that we can do. But the easiest baseline number is, can we find a trend that matches what that ultimate quantifiable number is? And if we start seeing those in all the data that we continue to collect, there's a pretty solid chance that that correlation with whatever that is will match. But hard and fast numbers is what I always say. Like, I want to be able to report on that first. Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, get chummy with your ops people, or go watch some videos on how to pull some of this data yourself. I mean, that's really like getting in there, poking around. I've done the math myself before. I've measured the amount of the average sales price of like the third deal, the fourth deal, the fifth deal, and I was doing some number crunching myself. And I think, depending on where it is, like, what makes the most sense, what can you pull from it, and asking for help from the appropriate teams. I know the dashboards aren't always reliable, but if you can get what you need to start with one or two metrics that you can confidently say you can pull data for, and then you can build that out as you match them to different competencies at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it takes
Yeah.
time, right? As you said, that you got to see the progression of it.
It does. Typically, depending on the type of the program, right? You won't start to see it take into effect maybe a quarter later or a couple months later. Then you can actually start seeing some of that data and actually start letting that data tell you what you need to know.
Yeah. I mean, there is a, I was having a different conversation with the SDRs, right? They were
Mhm.
saying, we are just not the numbers, right? So it's
Yeah.
usually people kind of, sales leadership point of view, they're looking at, are they meeting quota? Are they meeting a quota? And there's more to it. Who is more
Right.
helpful? Who is actually helping the others to be the champion? Who wants to be a champion or mentor others? So those are the new and different metrics you will be looking at. It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. So
It's very interesting. I think we could probably talk about metrics all day, right? Because somebody somewhere defined that this is the number that sees success. So, first, can we validate that that's actually it? Or are there other factors that actually tie into it? So, yeah, absolutely.
yeah. So, one of the reasons I reached out to you for this discussion is I heard your comments that the need for these peer-to-peer learning and building a community within the organization, community of sellers.
Hmm.
So sellers, actually any professional, right? They want to learn from the top performers. They want to learn who is the top performer in their cohort. Like, and I was talking to a chief sales officer. He's saying, in early days when I was a rep, the first thing I asked, like, who is the top performer? I said, oh, Tom is one. And then you say, well, I want to shadow Tom. I want to know what Tom is doing and how he's handling objections, and whenever competition coming up, how is he reacting to it. He just wants to absorb everything from him.
Yeah.
And then if you look at the solution architect or the sales engineers, they have so much industry knowledge. And then there it's a the junior sales engineer, they want to learn from this senior one who has all of this industry knowledge. And this peer knowledge or peer knowledge transfer, it is more important than going through generic courses like, how to sell or all of that, right?
Yeah.
So this is something I want to dig a bit deeper. And let me actually clarify this question a little bit more. So any kind of peer-to-peer learning usually happens in an informal setting, right? So for example, like, and this can happen, I'll give you two examples. One is, say you want to understand, you want to know quickly, like, what is the new product pricing change? Is there a new sales motion? You just go in a Slack channel, you ask the question, you instantaneously get the answer. So that's very much a synchronous kind of communication, instantaneous answer you
Yeah.
get. But that's not what I'm talking about. Usually you don't go there to lean back and try to learn a new skill. So the
Hmm.
second set of like informal learning happens, say for example, in sales kickoff, right? In sales kickoff, imagine in if in a normal situation we will have sales kickoff season coming up from January onwards. So they will be in Las Vegas, Mandalay Bay, after all day of listening to product managers, product marketers, external coaches, and VP of sales. The team get together, at 10 p.m. in a bar over a drink. And that's where they exchange these stories about customers, about product gaps, and accounts. Those are the goal, right? That's where the peer-to-peer learning happens a lot. But it's not scalable, number one. And the second is, when you want to put a little bit of structure to that conversation, that becomes a bit tricky,
Yes.
right? So I kind of want to find out, like, how do you create this culture of learning and sharing in an environment which is very much revenue driven, and winning is the culture,
Mhm.
right? That used to be, and it still is. So how do you create that culture?
Yeah. So great question. First, I can tell you've been to your fair share of SKOs. And second, yes, it is definitely I've pulled and I've talked to so many sales leaders in my entire life, like I just working for so many of them as well. That peer-to-peer learning, the sharing of best practices, um, it's what they prefer. A lot of them prefer that. That is typically how salespeople they do like to look at what the best of the best is doing. They want to know who they talked to, who they engaged with, what their processes were. And so I learned actually a long time ago working with some really fantastic instructional designers who taught me a lot about kind of adult learning and also taught me a lot about structuring information. And he taught me something that was this concept of practice, guidance, feedback. And I'm not, I don't claim to be an expert in the whole instructional design philosophy, but that really stuck with me for a really long time. So if you don't give them a chance to practice and have somebody guide them and give them feedback, then you're just giving them information. And so, while I don't think that we've perfected it really in the way that, we're all doing things because we're moving, at the speed of light, ideally whatever this is, this learning is, it would be nice to get people together in a way, and it would be short snippets of check-ins, a little bit more engagement rather than just a course telling you what it is. So to your point, the scale piece is tricky, right? So how do you then embed that into your interactions on a weekly basis? That would be the ideal situation. So I'm a big fan of leverage, and I think most salespeople are. You got to be able
Mhm.
to leverage everything you can to make your life easier, especially a sales leader who has to do so much more with even less time. It's all about leveraging the time that you already have with the person. So if you can get them to behaviorally start thinking about consistently practicing something, that's going to end up being better. It'll be just a muscle that you flex every day, like brushing your teeth when you wake up in the morning. It'll just be like, oh, okay, we're meeting today. oh, we're going to practice this. Now I'm going to give you some feedback, some guidance. You're going to go off and do it. We're going to come back and talk about it. If that is essentially is the whole coaching mindset piece, right? Of creating that culture. So to your point, how do you create that culture so that it sticks, so that there's that peer-to-peer learning, as you can have an example of an amazing rock star leader that has done X, Y, and Z, share the story, give them something to practice so that they can start doing that same thing. And the whole thing is you got to practice it. You know, you can hear it and think that's such a wonderful idea, but if you don't practice it, how are you going to even know if you can do it? So
Mhm.
that whole practice, guidance, feedback, huge. Um, Still aiming towards doing that all the time, but in my realm, it's like getting that muscle flexed. And there's so many outlying things that are in the way, right? Like, how big is your team? Do you even have the time to do this? So there's navigating that piece as well. But slowly getting them there so that their team has a chance to hear from the best, whether it be in type of a panel informate like panel discussion, or bringing a leader in that has done an amazing job with that. They want to hear that, but then what? So how can we get you to do that same thing so we can replicate what this amazing person is doing? So check-ins, being strategic about when you're doing it, how you're doing it, and leveraging the right forum to do it. You should do it during your next team call, or there's a next team meeting, or the next one-on-one we have. So providing that guidance on, here's the practice. I'll even write out the scenario for you. Now we're going to have somebody listen to you, give you some feedback and guidance. Uh, Try it out yourself, see if you had success with it, and then monitoring that along the way.
Yeah. And now there is a new thing about the Zoom etiquette, right? Or like how do you actually speak in front of a camera, how to put a light
Mhm.
on and all of that, right? Because the
Yes.
video selling is going to be here.
Yes, yes. So that virtual presence, right? How you even embed that into your backgrounds. How do you engage with them? How do you make sure that you're actually listening to them? It's all how you position your camera. It's all about your lighting too. All of that, absolutely. So there's that added layer, like I said, that added piece to just even make it more effective in your interactions and conversations with your prospects and customers.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, you are coaching the coaches, right? So when I
Mhm.
think about, I'm a big Star Wars fan. So when I think about super coach, to me, Yoda is the super coach. I'm also watching Mandalorian and wondering who is going to coach Baby Yoda or Grogu, right? So
Mhm.
and so the Yoda coaches the Jedi, right? The warrior, and you are kind of coaching the coaches because you're coaching the managers. Managers have to coach the SDR. So who is your favorite character? Coaching the coach character.
So I may be the only person in the world that has not seen The Mandalorian yet.
Oh,
So
okay.
I know it's on my list. I think the best leaders and coaches still need coaches too. And again, I actually stumbled across a Netflix documentary of it's called The Playbook, and I'm not a huge sports fan. I mean, I follow them to some degree, but I'm not like a diehard fan. But there are a number of coaches that they highlight in the docu series that are just really inspirational, and it all kind of there's so many out there, but I think the thing is, even they will tell you, and they've said it, they sometimes they don't have all the best answers, and that just goes to show ultimately that as a leader, you are human and you also need coaching, so you're never above it, even though you are coaching the most standout team, like the champions of the world years and years and years over. You don't have all the answers sometimes, and what you find when watching that or listening to them is that what they really do good at is they talk with other peers too. They spend the time learning from others, and they have their own inspirational coaches that they look up to as well. And so that should be kind of a consistent theme, like even the best of the best need. need some coaching, need some mentoring as well. And so
Yeah.
that series is great. What I learned from it was there's so many coaches out there, like phenomenal ones, that take the time to get to know their people, and that is kind of a big asset for them. Is then you really understand them and you actually really care about them at the end of the day, and that goes a really really long way.
Yeah. I think coachability is one of the characteristics everybody is looking for, because
Yes,
I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm learning new things every day, and I enjoy learning.
me too.
Yeah, so it's it's a fantastic thing. I learned one or two things today from you. Yeah, thank you for your time, and it was wonderful speaking to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jaya. It was great. I think we ended on a really great note, is that coachability is definitely something that all sales leaders should have, so that they can excel in their ways and be better or constantly learn. I love that.